What is resentment and how do we release it before it hurts not only ourselves, but also our marriages, our families, and our businesses? That's what we're digging into in today's episode of the Contentment Creator Podcast. But first, if you're new here, I'm your host, Ellen, a certified life coach, a singer, a mother, and a lover of alliteration, dogs, and deep conversation. And this is the Contentment Creator Podcast, the show designed especially for creative entrepreneurs just like you to dig deep to clarify your life vision, catalyze your creative flow, and fuel your entrepreneurial fire. And you may be wondering, okay, but why such a heavy topic if this space is all about clarity of vision, creative flow, and entrepreneurship? Because man, does all of that come to a screeching halt when resentment is at play. So let's talk about it and free the stuckness you might be experiencing in yourself, your relationships, your creativity, or your business. If you're tuning in on YouTube, you may notice we have a very special guest with us. This is my newborn daughter who will be joining us in this recording for a very special experiment. So hopefully, if you're hearing this episode right now, then the experiment was a success. But let's get started. So what is resentment? My working definition is unexpressed, unhealed, or unheard hurt and anger. Resentment is what I would call a compound emotion. It's not something that you feel once and it's gone, like you might with frustration or anger. Something pisses you off, the feeling comes and goes. Not the case with resentment. It requires a building up of feeling. It's what happens when a feeling like frustration, anger, disappointment, hurt goes unexpressed and unresolved and becomes more bitter in flavor. One way I think of resentment is as on a spectrum with anger. It goes frustration, anger, resentment, and resignation. What can begin as a slight frustration to a bigger source of anger then continues to grow and get hotter, so to speak, to become resentment. This is like when you feel anger come and then go, and then you think you've gotten over it, but then suddenly you get set off and all the little hurts that have been accumulating over the course of time come to the surface and flash hot. Suddenly, you're citing evidence you didn't even know you were gathering in an argument. That's resentment. That's growing anger underneath the surface that can be conscious or unconscious. And finally, the hottest form of anger, in my professional opinion, is resignation. That's when resentment has been left on a slow boil for so long that the water has completely evaporated and all that's left is a scorched pan. Without being properly communicated, healed, or resolved, we reach a level of hopelessness that means we have given up on that relationship, that endeavor, or even that direction we're going in life. That can look like quietly quitting your work or a relationship, or even at times the life that you have built. When we resign ourselves to something, it's actually because we have moved through frustration, anger, and resentment, and either we haven't done our work or circumstances haven't changed and we gave up. So what is our work? Emotions give us information that sometimes we need to do something about, but more often we simply need to be with them. What do I mean by be with? Being with our emotions is simply practicing presence with ourselves. Holding space for us to acknowledge feelings as they arise in our lives and expressing them in whatever way moves them through us and out of us in healthy ways. I've spoken in previous episodes about how to healthfully express emotions, but some ways you might see people express emotions are through journaling, naming them to a therapist or coach or friend, going to a rage room, or even moving the body with mindful exercise. Oftentimes, being present to your emotions and expressing them is sufficient to live joyful, well-adjusted, and fulfilled lives. Sometimes we may feel like there should be something that we do with our emotions, when in fact, all we need to actually do is practice doing nothing and simply be with them. Then, sometimes there are emotions that require us to do something with them, either because they're relational, meaning there's another person or thing in our lives that is the source or in the impact of our feelings, and we need to effectively communicate to them, or they are patterned, meaning the emotions continuously come back up for us and we are operating within a pattern or even an emotional habit. So while mindfulness and being with often help express the majority of our emotions we experience on a day-to-day basis, like anger and frustration, resentment is an emotion that we must do something about, both internally and externally. This is one of those times where the old saying, time heals all wounds, could not be more wrong. Because time is the very reason this wound has festered and grown worse. Resentment requires action. Now, what do you do when you have resentment? This episode, I'm going to share what to do with it from the lens of your internal landscape, your relationship or marriage, your parenthood, and your business. Because yes, we can even grow to resent our businesses. If you're tuning in to the whole episode, then you've got them all right here broken down into chapters. If you're catching one of our segments and want to hear the whole shebang, then head into the description box to grab the link to the whole episode or one of the other segments. So, how do we address resentment within ourselves first? Because before we launch into any external action like confronting a partner, reinventing our life, or blowing up our business, I want to share the single most impactful tool I gained in all of my education as a coach. First, most of the internet will tell you that the path to healing resentment is forgiveness. But coming from someone who really struggled as a young adult with holding long grudges, with re-triggering myself long after I thought I'd healed, and with accepting apologies from others or forgiving myself for mistakes, I did years and years of therapy, and I still didn't really grasp how to truly forgive. When others or circumstances caused me to feel wronged, betrayed, or unheard, I'd forgive in theory, but it would never really stick until this tool. It's called completion. Completion is an exercise you do to build the muscle of forgiveness. Why is it called completion? Because most of the time, when there is something within us or our lives that requires real forgiveness, it will cause us to feel incomplete until we have that. It's like a crack in the window where no matter how much we crank up the heat in our home, cold air continues to leak in, and we waste a lot of energy. The unfortunate truth is that forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. It must be chosen over and over again until the part of us that feels incomplete becomes whole and complete again. Trust and safety are restored, and we have let go of the past. That is completion. So how do we get complete? I'll offer you one simple way in this video, but I encourage you to download the tool I use for myself and with clients if you have a deeper issue or relationship that needs more of your discernment and attention. You can get it for free by going to the link in the description and emailing yourself this exercise. That way you can have it forever and use it repeatedly, even daily if you need it, and build your forgiveness muscle so that you can feel that relief of being truly complete. This approach to getting complete I'll share with you right now is simple in concept, but difficult in execution, much like a push-up or pull-up. The mechanics of the action are not hard to understand or even to do once or twice. But if you want to build up your ability and strength, you must practice this often for it to make a difference for you. I call it declare to repair. So first, embody the resentful or bitterly hurt feeling. Visualize the person who wronged you or hold the circumstance in your mind. And then, it's as simple as it sounds. You declare yourself complete without needing things to be different, or people to be different, or you to be different. You simply say or write, I declare myself complete, or I declare it complete, whichever resonates more for you. And then imagine putting the thing that you're energetically holding down. Some people close their eyes and envision putting an imaginary item down or closing a door. Some people like to hold something symbolic or something heavy so they can physically feel the sensation of putting the thing down. The power of the language we use and what we repeat to ourselves, as well as the power of visualization, are assets that we forget we have, but it is essential in developing the muscle of being complete and ultimately letting go of our resentments. I know that may sound too simple or not enough to make a dent, but I promise you, as someone who walked through life spending a lot of energy on a lot of stuff from my past and really never being able to let go of those emotions, I tried for years to let go of resentments I'd built over things that I logically knew shouldn't matter to me anymore. But the injustice or the demeaning feeling or the hurt I carried would cause me to pick it all right back up again, even years and years later. Everything changed for me when I put a name to that feeling incomplete, and practiced declaring myself complete, visualizing putting those weights down or embodying wholeness again. I regained my personal power and felt lighter every time I practiced it. And of course, like I said, some things are too heavy or big or complex to declare to repair. And for those things, I encourage you to download the tool I use. But I'm willing to bet you have something you're carrying resentment around right now, some little hurt that your inner self is ready to put down, and you could right now. So try it and let me know how it goes. Let's talk about what to do when resentment has piled up in your marriage. I recently worked through this in my own marriage as my husband and I had just welcomed our second child and have been navigating that hard newborn season that's a minefield for resentment to accrue. I used this analogy with my husband, and I'll share it here because I think it's important to understand. Resentment is a cancer to a marriage. Just like there are lots of types and stages of cancer, ranging from a little skin cancer that can be lasered off by a dermatologist to a terminal stage 4 bone cancer diagnosis. Resentment can range widely in intensity and significance. But make no mistake, Any cancer left untreated can become life-threatening. Resentment in a marriage that goes unexpressed, ignored, or unresolved for too long is a silent killer to partnership, trust, and love. Steps must be taken to address it, work on it, and heal it for the health of the relationship. Now, what those steps require of us is going to look different for every couple, so instead, I want to focus on what will make the most difference for couples who want to get to the root of their resentment. Now, like we previously talked about, resentment is that compounding of little hurts or frustrations that grow over time. One of the most common sources of resentment in a marriage or relationship is when needs or expectations go unmet. The experience of resentment in marriage especially often feels like we're in a state of wanting. Heidi Priebe did a video about resentment called Combating Resentment by Examining Our Unconscious Relationship Contracts. In the video, she compared the feeling of our resentment in our relationships to as if we were in a group project and we have completed our half of the project, but our partner won't turn in their work. We're left wanting that other person to simply behave the way that we believe they ought to. Sometimes in a marriage, it feels like the most obvious thing in the world to us. Like, we do X when we show up for our partner, so it seems fair to expect the person to do the same. And other times, if we're caught up in doing and being what we think our partner needs from us, then deep-seated people-pleasing or boundary breaking can lead to very strong feelings of resentment. The key to releasing resentment in a marriage is to first reflect on this. In order to cure the cancer of resentment, we must identify the conscious and unconscious stories we're operating inside of that are causing these resentments to grow. In our relationships, we have rules or even social contracts that we believe are how things go or how they're supposed to be. Most of these rules or agreements are deeply ingrained from childhood and totally unconscious. Some are conscious. For example, some of my conscious beliefs or contracts, the ones I know that I believe, that I identified when I did this work were, I expect reciprocity, but not transactionality. I feel yucky when I give too much or take too much from one relationship. If it feels like there's an imbalance, or if it's too tit for tat, then that creates issues for me. I also want to give and receive love in our preferred love languages. I'm a quality time and words of affirmation person, so I appreciate it when people show up for my heart in those ways, and I make a concerted effort to show love to others in the way that they receive love best. I also believe that in communication, clear is kind. Speaking plainly and directly about needs, wants, feelings, and agreements in a relationship is a top-tier need for me. If there are people in my life who avoid confrontation like the plague, then there will always be a limit to that relationship for me because it means that there isn't a level of true authenticity and honesty available to us. These are all things I know I need because I've done a decent amount of work to curate these beliefs. We all carry these kinds of core beliefs that we relate to as true about how the world works, and we create expectations of others to uphold their side of the agreement. We expect them to agree with our version of reality or how things are supposed to be. And if they don't, hurt and resentment grow. Identifying and communicating these conscious beliefs is a really profitable exercise to do with your partner or spouse because it nips so many little resentments in the bud. When you are aware of your and their expectations in a relationship, it makes it so much easier to speak the same language and avoid causing unintended harm. The trickier level to this work is identifying the unconscious contracts you hold others and yourself to. Identifying these can sometimes feel like opening your eyes in a dark room and waiting for your eyes to adjust. It can take a minute, and even then, it's not always clear what's there. The thing about these unconscious stories that I find maddening is that they can change and evolve without us knowing. I've done this kind of introspective work for years, and it seems the more time goes on and the deeper I come to know myself, it's like I continue to discover these unconscious stories that were either always lurking in the shadows out of sight, or simply I've acquired the older I get without realizing it. For example, when I recently did this exercise with my husband, when resentment was really getting in the way of connection during this difficult newborn stage, I discovered one of my unconscious stories is that I feel people should offer support both in the way that they think will help, and they should ask me what I need so I can tell them what support looks like. Because if they just do one of those, usually what they think I need doesn't fully cover it. And when they ask, sometimes I don't fully know what I need until someone gives it to me and I'm like, yes, that's it. Plus, it feels good when someone just tries to show you support without being told how to behave or what to say. Even if it doesn't fully meet the need that I have, it feels good and it feels like they're trying. And I believe that because that's what I do in most of my relationships. I offer my support by trying to say or do the things that I believe will help them, but I also check in and ask what they need and what support looks like for them. I wouldn't have been able to name that or know that about myself if I hadn't done this exercise. So I encourage you to look for yourself too. Look for the obvious conscious stories that you feel are true about how relationships work. And then look for the unconscious rules that you may not realize you're operating inside of in relationships and holding others to as well. The exercise is simple. Complete this sentence. They should blank because I blank. Super straightforward, but when you really dig beneath the surface to find those unspoken expectations you abide by in relationship, you can get right to the source of resentment and stop it in its tracks. And the beauty is that sometimes identifying it and communicating it is enough to change the course of action within that relationship. Or just the simple act of identifying it gives you the opportunity to assess it and either consciously opt in or consciously opt out of that expectation or rule. Maybe you understand why and where that belief came from and how it served you in the past, but maybe it no longer fits where you are now and what you need out of your current relationships. Either way, bringing what's unconscious to a conscious level is always extremely productive to do for yourself and your relationships, and will greatly contribute to the repair and healing of resentments. So I'd love to know, what are some of the conscious contracts that have really served you well, or what unconscious contracts did you unearth that genuinely surprised you? Let's answer these questions. What does resentment in parenthood look like? Where does it come from? What can we do about it? Resentment in parenthood is rarely loud and dramatic. It's quiet. It's subtle. It's the sigh you swallow at 3 a.m. It's the edge in your tone you didn't mean to have. It's the why am I the only one who always looping in your mind when you're holding a baby or reheating your coffee for the third time. Parenthood is a breeding ground for little resentments to build up, but there are really simple, concrete reframes that I found really helpful in this area. So let's layer the definition a little more in this context. While resentment is broadly speaking unexpressed, unhealed, or unheard hurt and anger, when we get more specific, resentment in parenthood is often grief plus unmet needs plus lack of agency. In early parenthood especially, our needs get deprioritized, our autonomy shrinks, our nervous systems are taxed, and we're expected to function like fully resourced adults while running on fumes. Resentment becomes the nervous system's way of saying something feels unfair, unsustainable, or unseen. The first move is not necessarily to fix it or do anything. It's honoring it as information. So here's an exercise called the boundary translation. When you notice resentment, ask yourself this: what need of mine feels chronically unmet right now? Where do I feel like I don't have choice? What am I doing that I haven't consciously agreed to? Often resentment is just a boundary we haven't named yet. When we do the work to discern, okay, this is a need of mine that's continuously going unmet, which is no longer okay for me, then the tendency might be to want to make a drastic change. But just like how resentment builds in these micro moments, in a slow accumulation, kind of like sediment building, that is how we can approach holding our boundaries in parenthood. We got here because of 300 tiny little self-abandonment moments. You skipped your shower. You ate last. You don't ask for help when you really needed it. You minimize your exhaustion. You push through with another cup of coffee. You can't make up for all those moments with one big overcorrection. So you slow down, tune in, and get clear. What is one need I can be 100% responsible for meeting today? Will I ask for help from my spouse or another caregiver at mealtime today? Will I put down the endless to-do list and take a long bath today during nap time? Will I take a 20-minute rest on the couch while the kids play instead of multitasking? It's the little ways we signal to ourselves, I matter, my needs are not optional, and I get to take up space, without it coming out as lashing out passive-aggressively, or either-oring it, like either I get to take care of them or me. And again, just like we talked at the top of the episode, how typically our emotions give us not an opportunity to do something about them, but to be with ourselves. That is an essential layer of conscious parenting. Yes, it's important to put action behind our awareness, like my needs aren't getting met, so I'm going to take an action today that prioritizes my needs. But it's equally important to simply be in the practice of staying with yourself, being with you. What does that mean? That means in those moments of intense overstimulation or self-abandonment or residual neglect that threaten to take your resentment and slide it into anger, connect with your body. Put your hand on your heart and on your gut, close your eyes, and breathe. As hard as we try to be present for our kids, honor the demand coming from within that we need attention. We need connection in this moment because we're on the verge of self-disconnection or self-abandonment. You may not have the ability or agency to leave the room and take physical space if you have littles, but you always have the opportunity to connect to self, to be with, to take space in that moment, to breathe and slow down. I share all of this not from knowing and mastery, but from an active student alongside you. Parenthood is the highest gradient we can climb in terms of putting to practice our self-love and our self-possession, really owning our experience, taking care of ourselves, being present with our bodies while moving through the storms of life. And I am genuinely curious to hear, what is the need that you will prioritize today? How will you get creative with your both and, where you can take care of your kids and you? And what's a win you can share of pausing in the midst of overwhelm and connecting inward? I'm eager to be inspired by you, and we'll keep an eye out for your comments below this video. Now that we've talked about resentment within ourselves, our marriage, and our parenthood, the last place I want to look at handling our resentment is in our business. We as business owners start our businesses because we seek independence, autonomy, freedom. But as time goes on and as business grows, what is asked of us changes. What our role becomes can exit our zones of genius and use all of our energy performing tasks that we hate or suck at. Our capacity gets more and more maxed out, and the temptation to grow more and more and more can burn us out. Sometimes where our calendars don't even become our own anymore, and it's like we have a job like anybody else. Meetings we can't miss and work we can't put off, responsibilities that weigh heavier and heavier. So we can start to resent the very thing that we created. The other layer that comes in here that we haven't addressed in any of the other sections of this episode is money. Money is a breeding ground for resentment to grow because it's a complex relationship in our lives that elicits complex feelings. When we don't make what we feel like is enough money from our business, we can resent it. And when it starts to feel like we have to feed the beast of our business by increasing our overhead or pouring too much of our own energy and money back into the business without much to show for it, that can also engender resentment. And often, just like in the marriage portion we covered, this can become a cancer to our roles as visionaries and CEOs of this business. It can lead to burnout and sometimes even make us fantasize about blowing it all up. If these feelings are creeping in to how you relate to your business, then resentment is rampant and something needs to be done. Here are a few places to look and then give some awareness-building questions to reflect on with some simple actions to take to realign with our business, release resentment, and regain some agency, clarity, and fulfillment again. So, how do we leave this cage of our own making? What is the key? Let's start with role drift, when we slowly move away from our place as the visionary and instead step into the role of operator. We all start as creators, the person with the idea and the will and drive to execute it. Then we become customer service, tech support, HR, the accountant, the project manager, and the content machine. Our zone of genius shrinks. Our administrative load expands. Resentment grows when you start to think more and more, this is just not what I signed up for. Or, I left a job for this? So ask yourself these questions. What percentage of my week is spent in my zone of genius versus in maintenance mode? If I'm honest, which tasks quietly drain me? Where has my business become rigid? Where have I unconsciously recreated employment instead of entrepreneurship? And here are some simple actions to take. Do a 2-week energy audit. Circle the 3 tasks that reliably deplete you, and then choose one to automate, delegate, eliminate, or restructure. Also, block CEO time into your schedule at least weekly. Take the space of revisioning and recalibrating to the big picture stuff that inspires you. Resentment often decreases not with a total overhaul, but the 1% shifts back to our path in the captain's chair of this ship. When we make decisions that support not only the business, but ourselves, it feels like we have more oxygen to breathe again, more choices available, more space to be me again. That takes me into the next perspective shift, capacity creep. I've made this analogy before, but we often hear about capacity as filling our cup. As business owners who become responsible for so much beyond ourselves, our clients, our deliverables, our systems and processes, our team members, our growth and visibility, that cup changes into more like a pool. And to fill a pool requires a totally different approach than to fill a simple cup. That's what I mean by capacity. How do we maintain the same ratio of fullness of a filled cup when we're filling a pool? What a lot of people look to first is the mechanics of the business. Better systems, new hires, changing and tweaking the operations. But what needs changing isn't the operating system of your business. It's our operating system, otherwise known as our nervous systems. This just feels like too much, is a phrase I hear from really successful people all the time. That tells me immediately this is a capacity issue. Their nervous system is on overload and their well-being is depleted. That's why one of the foundations for my beliefs as a business owner is you must raise the floor in order to raise the ceiling. The baseline of how you take care of yourself must rise as the demands and expectations of your business increase. This is also a good time for me to mention that I have a really powerful free guide called the CEO Capacity Creator that would be perfect for anyone struggling with this issue in their business. So find the link in the description and start implementing these tools right away. You will get a ton of value out of it, I guarantee it. But let's take a look together right now in this moment, and you can approach it from a couple different ways. For the highly self-aware business owner, do some reflection. What do I really need at this stage? What is going to restore me, nourish my body, my mind, my creativity, my heart? How can I get more intentional and creative about prioritizing my needs? And for those who are maybe not clear on answering that question directly, then you can approach it indirectly. What does it look like if I were to elevate my self-care to CEO care? What do I imagine fuels a CEO that's running a successful company? What do I fantasize about having space for when I get to that level? Cast the vision of what you want or imagine is out there for you and claim it for yourself. Just like that saying, dress for the job you want, not the one you have. Pour into your pool now. Don't just fill your cup. And lastly, let's talk about money. That is gasoline on resentment. When we feel like we aren't making enough money, we feel unseen, undervalued, and undersupported. We start resenting and blaming external forces like the market, our clients, our audience, our team, and most painfully, ourselves. With this component, it's important to take care of the other elements I've covered: the nervous system, the well-being, the realignment with self, before tweaking this area. But when we have nourished ourselves and the math is just not mathing, then it's time to get creative again. Look at pricing honestly. Look at adding sustainable revenue streams. Get curious about other models available to you. Ideate and pivot to find what works. And if you are on the side of business ownership where it's not about growth, but about trimming down, this inquiry can sting, but it's important to consider. Ask yourself this: did I expand because I desired it or because I felt I should? Am I running someone else's dream business? Did I grow for growth's sake and not because it's actually my vision of success? If I could design this business for my life right now, what would I change? What would I simplify? What would I let go of? Again, making these decisions from a depleted place will always be a band-aid and not actually fix your business or heal your resentment. But if resentment roots in self-abandonment and you've created something that you feel undervalues you or that doesn't reflect who you are or want to be anymore, then get honest and have those conversations with your team, a coach, your trusted advisors, and see what opportunities you have to realign. So, creator, where do you see your reflection in this mirror? Which questions from this inquiry struck a chord with you and feel worth exploring? If it helps, please share what you find in the comments and reach out for support if you're stuck thinking, okay, now what's next? And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode of the Contentment Creator Podcast, where we've covered resentment in ourselves, our marriages, our parenthood, and our businesses. Whether you caught the whole episode or just one of our segments, either way, thank you for making it all the way to the end, and I hope that you are subscribed so you don't miss another episode. Please join me in my mission to turn a world full of content creators into a world of contentment creators. Bye, y'all.
What do you need?